The quiet hum of your devices. The subtle glow from a screen in a dark room. Sometimes that's all it takes for the world to shift, for the familiar to become profoundly, unnervingly wrong. Tonight, we delve into those digital shadows, the places where the lines between what's real and what's merely data begin to blur, and then break entirely. These are the tales of things that watch from the periphery, things that follow the currents of the internet, things that wait just beyond the lens of your camera. So, turn off the lights, settle in, and put on your headphones. Let the stories wash over you, and remember, you're never truly alone online. The blinking red light on the new security camera in our living room was the first thing that started feeling wrong, even before anything actually happened. My dad had just installed a whole system for cameras covering the main entrances and living areas, because there'd been a couple of package thefts in our neighborhood, and he's big on being proactive. I'm Mark. I was 17 then, and mostly I just found the new cameras annoying. They were always there, little black eyes in every corner, watching our perfectly normal, boring suburban life. We had the app on our phones, of course, so we could check the feed anytime. It was mostly just my younger sister, Emily, leaving her backpack in the hallway, or our dog, Buster, sleeping on the couch. The first odd thing happened maybe a week after installation. It was a Saturday night. My parents were out at a dinner party, and Emily was at a friend's sleepover. I was home alone, planning to game until late. Around 10 p.m., I went downstairs to grab a snack and noticed the living room light was on. I remembered turning it off before I went up to my room. I shrugged it off, figured I must have forgotten. Maybe Emily had been down there earlier before her sleepover and left it. I hit the switch, plunging the room back into darkness, grabbed my chips, and headed back up. It was a small thing, easy to dismiss, but it stuck with me in a way I couldn't explain. Later that night, around 1 a.m., I was still up, scrolling through social media, and I remembered the light. On a whim, I opened the security app on my phone to check the living room footage from earlier. I scrolled back to around 9:45 p.m., just before I went downstairs. The feed showed the living room, dark and still. Then, at exactly 9:58 p.m., the light in the living room clicked on. No one entered the frame. No shadow, no movement, just the sudden illumination. It stayed on for a few minutes, then clicked off at 10:01 p.m. And then, at 10:02 p.m., I walked into the frame, flicked the light on, and then immediately off again. The camera had recorded the light turning on and off when no one was there. That was unsettling. I spent the next day trying to find a logical explanation. A power surge? A faulty switch? But the camera didn't flicker or show any other signs of electrical issues. The next week passed without incident, and I started to relax, telling myself it was a fluke. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got an alert on my phone. Motion detected in living room. It was 3:30 p.m. I was at school, and my parents were both at work. Emily was still at school too. My stomach dropped. I immediately pulled up the live feed. The living room was empty. The light was off. Nothing. I refreshed the app, thinking it was a false alarm. Maybe the dog had walked through. But Buster was at doggy daycare that day. The alert lingered, a tiny digital prickle of dread. When I got home, I immediately checked the camera recordings for that 3:30 p.m. alert. The live feed had shown nothing, but the playback was different. The recording showed the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the window, completely still. Then, for just one frame, maybe two, something was there. A tall, thin, dark figure, just at the edge of the frame, near the archway leading to the hallway. It was like a smear, a distortion in the video, not quite solid, but unmistakably a human shape. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was only visible during playback, not live. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rewound it again and again, pausing at that exact second. It was there, a silent, unmoving witness to our absence. I didn't tell my parents. They'd just say I was seeing things or that the camera had a glitch. But I started checking the feed obsessively, especially at night. It became a ritual. I'd lie in bed, phone in hand, watching the static, silent rooms of our house. The figure started appearing more frequently, always fleeting, always at the very edge of the frame, always during playback, never on the live feed. It was like a ghost in the machine, a digital specter. It moved from the living room to the hallway, sometimes just a blur of movement, sometimes standing unervingly still, almost peeking around a corner, as if waiting for something. It never looked at the camera directly, never acknowledged its presence. It just was. One night I couldn't sleep. It was almost 4 a.m. I opened the app just to check. The feed for the downstairs hallway showed nothing, but I decided to rewind it just a few minutes from when I knew everyone would be asleep. And there it was. At 3:52 a.m., the figure appeared at the end of the hallway, near the door to Emily's bedroom. It stood there, a dark, indistinct shape, for almost 30 seconds. It didn't move. It just stood, facing the door. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a flicker now, not just a distorted shadow. This was a presence watching. My sister was sleeping, completely unaware, just on the other side of that door. And it was there, in the dark, captured only by the cold, unblinking eye of the camera, waiting for no one to be watching. The worst part was knowing that if I had been watching live, I wouldn't have seen it. It only existed in the playback, a dark secret stored in the cloud. It meant that whatever this thing was, it was specifically avoiding real-time observation. It was aware of the cameras, aware of the possibility of someone watching, and it chose to only manifest when it knew it wouldn't be caught in the act. It was an intelligence, observing our lives, moving through our home, but only when it was sure it was truly unseen. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a deliberate act of concealment. The realization sent a chill deeper than any sudden scare could have. It was actively hiding from us, living alongside us, just out of sync with our perception. I eventually told my dad, showing him the playback, but he blamed it on network interference or a corrupted video file. He even called the security company who ran diagnostics and found nothing wrong. They suggested I might have an active imagination. I didn't push it, but I still checked the feed every single day, every night. And sometimes I still see it. A fleeting shadow in the living room, a brief stillness in the hallway, always in playback, always when the house is empty or everyone is asleep. We moved houses last year to a different town, a fresh start. We didn't install a new security system, but sometimes when I'm alone, I wonder if it learned. I wonder if it's still out there, just beyond the edge of what we can truly perceive, in the quiet spaces only the unseen can inhabit. That feeling, the one that lingers just behind your eyes, is a familiar companion in these spaces. What happens when the connection isn't just a conduit for information, but for something else entirely? Something that doesn't just observe, but truly sees. The blinking red light on our kitchen security camera used to be a comfort, a little electronic guardian in the corner of our quiet suburban home. It was one of those smart cams my dad installed after a string of package thefts in our neighborhood. I was home alone that summer, 19 years old, working a night shift at a local diner, so I was usually asleep when everyone else was awake, and vice versa. My parents were away on their annual anniversary cruise, and my younger sister was at a sleepaway camp for 2 weeks. It was just me and the cat, Buster. The first few nights were normal, the house settling into its own rhythm without the usual family chaos. I'd come home around 2 a.m., make a quick snack, check my phone, and head to bed, the camera's little red eye watching over the empty living room and kitchen. It was about a week into my solo stint when I first noticed something off. I'd just gotten home, tired, hungry, and ready to crash. I remember leaving my work uniform draped over a kitchen chair, planning to wash it in the morning. I grabbed a glass of water, ate a handful of pretzels, and then went to my room. The next afternoon, I woke up around noon, stretched, and headed to the kitchen for coffee. My uniform was neatly folded on the counter, perfectly stacked, almost like it had been ironed. I stared at it for a moment, confused. My first thought was that I must have done it in my sleep, or maybe I was just more organized than I remembered from my late-night haze. It was weird, but I brushed it off. I was tired, after all, and sleep can make you do strange things. A few nights later, it happened again. This time, it was my laundry. I had a basket overflowing with clothes in my bedroom, most of it clean but unfolded. I distinctly remembered leaving it in a messy pile before heading to work. When I got home, I barely glanced at it, just threw my dirty uniform on top. But the next day, when I finally peeled myself out of bed, the basket was gone. I found it in the laundry room, every single item folded and put away in its respective drawer. Even my socks were paired. This time, I knew I hadn't done it. My sleepwalking wasn't that productive, and besides, I was a slob when it came to laundry. A chill ran down my spine. A quick, unsettling thought that I immediately pushed away. It had to be a friend, or maybe my parents had come home early. But I hadn't gotten a call, and their car wasn't in the driveway. That's when I remembered the kitchen camera. It recorded continuously, saving footage to the cloud. I felt a little silly, but the curiosity was eating at me. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the security app. I started with the night I found my uniform folded. I scrubbed through the hours after I went to bed, watching the empty kitchen, the nightlight casting long shadows. For a long time, nothing. Just the occasional flicker of light from a passing car, or Buster the cat padding through. Then, around 3:47 a.m., the light in the kitchen flickered on. My heart jumped. I leaned closer to the screen. The light stayed on for about 15 minutes, but the camera showed absolutely no one. Just an empty kitchen, brightly lit, before the light clicked off again. It was chillingly silent on the recording. I watched it again and again. The light was definitely on, but the room was empty. No shadows, no movement, nothing to suggest a person was there. It was like the light had turned itself on. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I skipped ahead to the night of the laundry. Again, I watched the empty house after I went to bed. This time, it was closer to 4 a.m. The laundry room light, visible through the kitchen doorway, flickered on. I could see the light spill into the kitchen, illuminating a portion of the floor. And again, no one, just the light on its own. Stayed on for a while and then clicked off. The recording was grainy, but clear enough to confirm. There was no one visible in the frame when these things were happening. No one I could see anyway. A cold dread started to creep in. I paused the playback and just sat there, listening to the silence of my own house. The sun was up, but it felt like the middle of the night. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet. Ridiculous, I know, but I felt like I needed something, and started a slow, methodical search of the house. Every closet, every shower curtain, under every bed. Nothing. The windows were locked, the doors were secured. There was no sign of forced entry, no hidden intruder. It was just me, the cat, and the unsettling thought of what the camera had shown. Or rather, what it hadn't shown. The house felt different now, no longer a comforting sanctuary but something observed. I went back to the computer, my fingers trembling slightly as I navigated the footage. I started watching every night, just scrubbing through, looking for anything out of place. And I found more. The front door, slightly ajar for a few minutes, then slowly closing itself. The thermostat being adjusted. The fridge door opening and closing. All of these things happening in a completely empty house, according to the camera. It was always after I was asleep, always when no one was actively watching the live feed. The entity, whatever it was, only seemed to appear when it was guaranteed no human eye was directly observing it. The camera was just an unblinking eye, recording what it saw, or rather what it didn't see. Then I found it. It was the night before my parents were due to return. I was asleep, the house quiet. Around 3:20 a.m., the living room light came on. And for a split second, just a flicker, a distortion in the corner of the frame, I saw it. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more like a shimmering, almost translucent outline of a human figure. It was incredibly faint, barely there, like a ripple in water. It moved slowly, gliding across the room, then it was gone, and the light clicked off. It was only visible for a fraction of a second, an anomaly that the camera seemed to struggle to register. It was there, and then it wasn't. I played it back frame by frame, zooming in, but it was just a blur, a ghost in the machine. A figure that only showed up when no one was watching live. I never told my parents. What was I going to say? That the house was tidying itself? That I saw a shimmer on a security camera feed? They would have thought I was losing my mind from working too many late shifts. When they came home, everything went back to normal, or at least normal enough that I didn't notice anything else. But I never look at that little blinking red light the same way. It's not a comfort anymore. It's a constant reminder. A reminder that sometimes, even when you think you're alone, even when the camera shows an empty room, there might be something else in the house with you, just beyond the edge of human perception, waiting for you to fall asleep before it starts its strange, silent work. And it's always watching even when you aren't, even when no one is. The world shrinks to the size of a screen, and suddenly, you're confronted with an impossible image, a perfect reflection of a broken reality. The digital landscape can be a vast ocean, and sometimes, things drift in from depths we can't comprehend, leaving behind only echoes. The box arrived on our porch with no return address, just a scrawled, "Delivered," in thick black marker. It was a Saturday mid-morning when most people would be up and about, but the security camera footage from that day shows the delivery truck pulling up to an empty street. No one else around. My name is Alex, and I was 17 that summer, home alone while my parents were out of town for a long weekend. The package felt light, almost too light for its size, which was about that of a shoebox. I remember feeling a strange prickle of unease as I carried it inside, even before I knew what was actually in it. It just felt off, sitting there by our front door like that, an anonymous brown rectangle in the bright sunlight. Inside, the box contained a single, sleek black security camera, about the size of my palm, with a small instruction manual. No branding, no company name, just a generic model number. My dad had been talking about getting an extra camera for the backyard, so I figured maybe he'd ordered it as a surprise. I shot him a text, "Did you order a new camera?" And his reply came back almost immediately, "No, why?" That's when the first real shiver went down my spine. We already had a full system connected to our phones, and this one looked totally different. Still, I was a tech-savvy kid, and curiosity got the better of me. I decided to set it up in the living room, just for fun, to see if it even worked. The setup was surprisingly easy. Connected to my home Wi-Fi, and I downloaded an app it directed me to. The feed was crisp, clear, showing a wide-angle view of our living room. Our couch, the coffee table, the big screen TV, all looking perfectly normal. I spent the rest of the day doing homework, playing video games, occasionally checking the feed on my phone. Nothing. Just the quiet, empty living room, occasionally disturbed by my cat walking past the lens. As evening fell, the house grew dark. I turned on a lamp, then went to my room to watch a movie. The camera was still running, a silent, unblinking eye on the downstairs. It was around midnight when I decided to check the feed one last time before bed. I opened the app, and for a split second, the image wasn't right. It was like a quick hiccup, a visual stutter. The living room looked normal, but then, for a blink, There was a faint, almost transparent figure standing by the fireplace. It was tall, thin, and just there. Then it was gone. Just the empty room again. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Must have been a glitch in the app or my phone screen. Maybe a reflection. I closed the app, reopened it. Nothing. The room was still peaceful. I told myself it was my imagination, tired eyes playing tricks. But the image, as faint as it was, stuck with me. The next morning, the memory of the glitch nagged at me. The camera had a playback feature, storing footage locally on a small SD card I'd inserted. I decided to review the recording from the previous night, just to prove to myself it was nothing. I scrolled back to the exact moment I'd seen it. The timestamp read 12:07 a.m. I watched. The living room was perfectly still, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights outside and the single lamp I'd left on. My cat walked through at one point, a fuzzy blur. I sped up the footage, then slowed it down, frame by frame, right at 12:07 a.m. And there it was. Not a glitch, not a reflection. For exactly one frame, a shadowy, elongated form stood by the fireplace. Then it was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rewound it, played it again. One frame, a clear, distinct, human-like shape. Too tall to be a person, yet too defined to be a shadow. It was facing the camera, or at least, its head seemed to be angled that way. There were no discernible features, just a dark, smooth outline. I checked the live feed. Empty. I walked into the living room. Empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Who or what was that? And why did it only appear for a single frame, like a phantom caught between two moments? I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a malfunction of the camera, but something the camera was actually seeing. I spent the entire day glued to that camera feed, watching it like a hawk. I even set up a monitor next to me while I ate. Every time I left the living room, I'd glance at the screen. Nothing. Not a thing. The room remained perfectly empty, save for the occasional dust motes dancing in the sunlight filtering through the windows. It was like whatever that thing was, it knew when I was watching live. It only showed itself in the recorded playback. This realization was far more unsettling than any jump scare could have been. It implied a kind of awareness, a deliberate avoidance of being seen in real time. It was like it was playing a game, a very slow, very terrifying game. Night fell again. I was too scared to go to sleep. I decided to stay awake, monitoring the feed. Around 3 a.m., I started to feel drowsy. I leaned my head back, just for a moment, and must have drifted off. When I startled awake, my phone was still clutched in my hand, the app still open. The live feed showed nothing. But then I noticed the red dot next to the record icon was still blinking, meaning it had been recording the whole time. My finger trembled as I scrolled back just a few minutes. At 3:14 a.m., while I was asleep, there it was again. Not by the fireplace this time. It was sitting on our couch, where I had been sitting just hours before. The same elongated, featureless figure, perfectly still, facing the camera. It was there for 2 frames this time. 2 frames. I didn't sleep at all that night. When my parents pulled into the driveway the next morning, I was a wreck. I tried to explain, to show them the footage, but my dad just looked at it and said, "Looks like a bad signal, Alex. Glitchy camera. Throw it out." He didn't see it. He couldn't see it. Or maybe he just didn't want to. I unplugged the camera, removed the SD card, and threw the whole thing into the trash, burying it under a pile of garbage bags. I even disconnected the app from my phone. But the image of that thing, sitting on our couch, watching the empty room through the camera's lens, is burned into my mind. I know it wasn't a glitch. I know it saw me, or at least it knew when I wasn't looking. Now, months later, I still can't shake the feeling that it's still here, even without the camera. that it just decided to stop showing up in the recordings because I got rid of its eye. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in the house, I'll walk into the living room. The TV is off, the lights are off, and everything is dark and still. But I get this absolute certainty that something is sitting there on the couch or standing by the fireplace, perfectly still, just out of my line of sight. And it's only there when I'm not looking directly at it, knowing that if I just turn my head fast enough, it will be gone before my eyes can register it. It's in the silence, in the shadows, waiting for the moments when I'm not truly watching. We seek patterns, we crave understanding, but what if the very fabric of what we perceive as stable begins to unravel? What if the spaces we navigate every day are not as fixed as we believe? And what if something else knows how to exploit those shifts? The blinking red light of the new security camera was supposed to make me feel safer, not like I was being watched by something I couldn't see. My dad had installed it himself after the break-in down the street, pointing it at the living room and the front door, just in case. I was home alone a lot back then, in my senior year of high school. Both my parents worked late, and it was usually me, the dog, and a microwave dinner by the time the streetlights came on. This new camera, a sleek black dome mounted high in the corner, was supposed to be a comfort. Instead, it was just another thing to think about, another eye in the house that wasn't mine. The camera fed into an app on my dad's phone, but he'd given me the login too, for emergencies. I rarely checked it. Why would I? I was in the house. But one Tuesday evening, I remember being in my room, studying for a history test, and I heard a weird scraping sound from downstairs, like furniture being dragged across the hardwood floor. It wasn't loud, just enough to make me pause. My dog, Gus, was asleep at the foot of my bed, completely oblivious. I figured it was just the house settling, or maybe the wind. Still, I picked up my phone, just to be sure, and pulled up the live feed. The feed was clear, a wide-angle view of our living room. The TV was off, the couch was empty, and the front door was definitely locked and undisturbed. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. No sign of anything moving, no furniture out of place. The scraping sound hadn't repeated. I dismissed it, chalking it up to my imagination or an old house creaking. But later that night, after my parents were home and asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling. I pulled up the app again, not the live feed this time, but the recorded playback from earlier, just to satisfy my curiosity. I scrolled back to the time I'd heard the sound, about 7:45 p.m. The playback showed me exactly what I'd seen on the live feed. An empty living room. I fast-forwarded a bit, then slowed it down, looking for anything. And that's when I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. For a split second, maybe a single frame, the camera feed glitched. It wasn't a static burst or a freeze. It was like a piece of the image, right in the center of the living room, simply vanished. A perfect, symmetrical square of blackness, where the carpet and the coffee table should have been, just gone. Then it was back, normal again. I rewound it, played it again, frame by frame. There it was. A blank space. It was so brief, so subtle, that if I hadn't been looking for something, I would have missed it entirely. My first thought was a camera malfunction, maybe a software bug. But it was too precise, too central. And it only happened once in that whole recording. I showed it to my dad the next morning, but he just shrugged. Probably a network hiccup, he said, barely glancing at my phone. These things aren't perfect. He wasn't wrong, but it didn't feel right. Felt deliberate somehow. A few nights later, the scraping happened again. This time, I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, and it came from the living room again, clearer this time. A sharp, distinct scrape, followed by a softer drag. Gus, who had been curled up by my feet, lifted his head, a low rumble starting in his chest. His ears were perked, staring towards the living room. He never did that. My heart started beating faster. I stood perfectly still, listening. Nothing. just the hum of the refrigerator. I knew I wouldn't see anything on the live feed, not after last time, but I felt like I had to check. I pulled out my phone. The live feed, of course, was perfectly still, empty. The living room bathed in the soft, green glow of night vision. I watched for a full minute, breathing shallowly, waiting for something, anything. Nothing happened. Gus let out a soft whine, then went back to his spot, settling down with a sigh. It was like whatever had been there or whatever had caused the sound was gone the second I looked. I recorded the next 10 minutes of the feed, just in case. I didn't watch it live. I just let it record, put my phone down, and went to bed, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. The next morning, before school, I looked at that recording. My hands were a little shaky as I scrubbed through the timeline. And there it was again. Not a single square this time, but a thin, vertical line of missing pixels that appeared and vanished in the middle of the room. It was like a seam in the fabric of reality, opening and closing in an instant. This time, though, it was slightly different. It was narrower, almost imperceptible. And it moved. Just a tiny fraction, a few pixels to the left, compared to the last time. As if whatever caused it was shifting its position, inch by inch. It was less like a glitch and more like a hole that was almost completely invisible when I was watching live, but that left a trace on the recorded footage. A tiny, perfect void that only existed when no one was looking directly at it. It was like something was trying to manifest or simply exist in that space but could only do so when unobserved. And it was getting closer to the couch just by a tiny bit. I couldn't explain it. My dad still thought it was a technical issue, but I knew it wasn't. It was something else. Something that knew exactly where the camera was and how to avoid being seen. I never watched the live feed again after that. I just couldn't. The thought of something being in that room, something that could only fully exist when unobserved, was too much. Instead, I started checking the recordings every morning, a ritual of dread. Each time, the glitch would be there. A small, perfect void, a shifting line, sometimes a fleeting square, always a little closer to the center of the room, a little more defined than before. It never stayed in one place, always moving by a tiny increment, always just a little bit different. And it was getting larger, slowly, almost imperceptibly each night it appeared, like it was expanding, ready to take up more space. I've since moved out of my parents' house, but they still have that camera. And I still wonder what it's showing them late at night in the playback they never check. These stories, they linger. They plant themselves not in the grand gestures of terror, but in the quiet, unsettling recognition that the screens we rely on, the connections we cherish, can also be gateways to something else entirely. They remind us that the truly frightening things often hide in plain sight, just a click or a scroll away, waiting for their moment to surface. The unease isn't just about what happened to them, but about what might happen to you or what might already be happening. For a new descent into the chilling every week, subscribe to Scareverse.